You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 40 of the Common Descent Podcast.
Yeah, we're 40 now.
We are. What a cool number to be at. Our topic for this episode is the land of Madagascar.
Oh.
Madagascar is a cool place. This is actually the second episode we've ever done on a part of the world.
Yeah, location, which is
we did Antarctica back in episode 11.
I like these because it's a different angle to come from, so it's cool when we get suggestions.
It is. So in this episode, we're going to talk about why Madagascar is interesting today, because it is.
Oh, yeah.
Geographically and biologically a very, very cool place.
There's a reason we have a random Madagascar area in my aquarium and have lemurs. Because people all the time are like, why do you have lemurs? Why wouldn't you have lemurs?
What do you not want lemurs?
Yes.
What are you, some kind of lemur hater?
Yeah. Do you not like to be happy?
So then after that, we'll do a tour through the history of Madagascar, the ancient history, and we will take an extended stopover on that tour in the late Cretaceous of Madagascar for two reasons. Number one, because that's one of the most famous fossil localities on the island, and also because that was the request that inspired this episode, sent to us by Thomas on Twitter, who specifically asked for a discussion about late Cretaceous Madagascar. We figured we might as well zoom out a little bit, talk about the island, but we will spend a good chunk of time discussing some very cool fossils from that time period.
Yeah, so thanks, Tom. Cool suggestion.
Thanks very much. Before we do that, a few announcements, just a couple today. First, we've uploaded a few things recently. We uploaded our But We Digress, all about mermaids, following our speculative evolution episode.
Boy, was that fun to record.
It was, and people have already really enjoyed it, so we're getting some cool responses.
I'll do as many as you ask us to.
Yes. Also, our patrons, we put up some new Patreon. We got a special audio for patrons to celebrate some milestones we've recently hit. And we put up a poll that is allowing our patrons to help us decide where to take the podcast in the future. How to spend the money that they're donating to us, basically.
As we request your assistance in making this decision.
Yeah, so if you're a patron and you haven't seen that, go head over to Patreon and check it out. If you are not a patron, hey, now's a good time. You get to have a say in what we do next.
Make your voice heard.
Yes, you need to have a voice. Also, another exciting new bit of audio that will be released by the time this episode comes out, most likely.
Yes.
We have made our first ever appearance on another podcast.
Yeah, we get to be guests for the first time.
Yeah, so we will be appearing on Science Sort Of with Ryan Haupt, who you will remember, if you've been following us, was part of our Sloths live stream discussion that we had earlier this year.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
It was. Talking with Ryan was super fun on the live stream, and it was super fun on the podcast. So head on over to sciencesortof.com or look up Science Sort Of on your favorite podcast source, and you can hear us talking about ourselves for once.
It was a lot of fun, and it was very, very easygoing. It was very natural to do, so that was very cool.
Indeed. And we'll put a link to that in all the normal places.
Definitely.
The other announcement, which we have been planning for a while and can officially release since the official, semi-official plan is out now.
Yeah, it is.
Will and I, as the Common Descent Podcast.
So all of the Common Descent Podcast.
The whole podcast crew.
Oh, man.
Will be making our first public appearance this year in Atlanta in early September at DragonCon.
Yeah, we will.
Will is very excited about it.
Oh, it's my two favorite things coming together. It makes me very happy.
So we're going to be we're both going to be on at least one panel.
Yes.
Talking about some sciencey stuff. and then we will probably be showing up at some other stuff around the con. As we have details and a plan, we'll let you know as it gets closer.
Yeah, we'll update as we are updated.
But if you're going to be at Dragon Con, or if you are going to be in Atlanta around early September, just come on over and say hi to us.
Yeah. Super excited to do this. Also super excited to actually be out where people can be met and we can be met.
Yes. Oh, that's going to be the idea of interacting with people,
Yeah.
as opposed to speaking into the void. Will be quite nice.
I've met one listener in person when I went to Crocfest, which was very cool.
Yeah,
yep.
Very nice. The person who requested this topic, Thomas, I've actually met in person, which is pretty cool.
It's neat.
Indeed. Anyway, those are the announcements, which means it is time, as it always comes time, for news. Every episode, we pick some news from the news in paleontology and evolution and similar related cool things. Will, start us off.
Very well. My first bit of news is a neat one. It is about a newly discovered early sauropodomorph, which is within the same group as sauropods, those giant, long-necked dinosaurs that make us cry when their moms die. This new specimen is interesting. It's early, which is cool. It's also big, which is kind of changing some of the views on how and when members of this overall group got big.
And the biggest of the dinosaurs.
Yes, biggest of the land creatures. So this research is done by Cecilia Appaldetti et al., and it's published in the Journal of Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. The article I'm reading from is from the New York Times by Nicholas St. Fleur. To get things started off, we'll intro the new specimen. This sauropodomorph, which are, it's very similar to the sauropods, but a little different. And
the sauropods, the big long neck, long tail dinosaurs. The sauropodomorphs are kind of the big group that includes their ancestors and their close cousins.
So this is within that group, just not quite yet, the sauropods we recognize. Because it's a very early on. This is Triassic specimen from Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And it is called Ingentia prima, which means the first giant. Catchy name.
Cool name.
Yeah, it's a cool name. I always find names like this fun because I have a moment when I read them when I was like, it's going to be awkward when someone finds an older one. Hey, Ingentia, I'm sorry.
Enjoy your rain while it lasts.
Yep. But this is a large animal for the Triassic especially. Most dinosaurs during Triassic were not all tiny, but they did not get huge. The researchers were saying that, on average, 3 tons is kind of the max for a lot of the dinosaurs you see during this time, which is heavy, but that's not even as big as your modern elephants in Africa. So,
yeah,
not massive. This dinosaur was about 33 feet long, estimated, and weighed between 7 and 10 tons.
Which would be a large elephant.
Which, yeah, it's a good-sized elephant. This is a big dinosaur. The reason this stands out is before this discovery, it was typically thought that sauropods and their cousins did not start getting big until the Jurassic.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little early to see something so large. The earliest giant, quote-unquote, before this moment was thought to be Volcanodon, which is a cool name again, which lived about 180 million years ago and was between 20 and 35 feet long, so roughly same-ish size. But this is now way before this. Triassic runs from 200 to just over 230 million years ago. So we're stretching that date back by quite a bit. And this means sauropods and their cousins were getting big earlier than we thought.
Yeah, that they reached those sizes before the true sauropods arose, outside of that main lineage.
That's very interesting. That changes what we thought. It also grew differently than the true sauropods, which is also important because if you're getting big, it's important to know how you got big. Sauropods, for the most part, a lot of the big ones grow consistently. So they grow, and so they are just going to continually grow from birth until they're large. Ingentia grew on a cyclical cycle, which basically means seasonal. It grew fast during one part of the year, slow during another part, which is how most reptiles grow today. During the warmer times, they grow well. During the colder times, they don't. Or during the wet season and the dry season, when things are good.
So these repeated growth spurts.
Yes, so we saw that, or the researchers saw that in Ingentia when they examined the bone, which is interesting because it means you could still get big growing this way. And it changes kind of the way to look at things. Ingentia also didn't look like a sauropod, just so you all know. It had a longer neck, but not a really long neck. And instead of having those big straight column legs, it was more bent. They would have bent knees and elbows.
Yeah, it's part of that group that I think it used to be called the prosauropods, which are now sort of the greater sauropodomorphs. But I like this not only because big things are cool and new dinosaurs are cool, but also it's yet another branch of the dinosaur family tree that reached ridiculous sizes.
Yeah.
Like 10 tons is big for most dinosaurs, but many different lineages have done that.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the true sauropods, which multiple times have reached insanely large sizes.
Yes, ridiculous sizes.
And this is something dinosaurs were really, really good at doing.
And they did draw another connection in that Ingentia did show signs of the efficient breathing that sauropods are thought to have had with the air sacs and passageways in the bones. So there's definitely similarities between that. It's not a completely an oddball for being big, but yeah, that's something that dinosaurs were good at. And it's interesting that we at least have not yet seen that with land mammals, as often or today.
Absolutely. That's really fun. Learning how dinosaurs got big is always exciting.
It is. Just need to go back with the camera.
Yes, we'll do a sound of thunder and we'll travel back. My first bit of news is about humans and how humans arose. So this is actually something we discussed in episode 18, this notion that there is a little bit of competing hypotheses for how our species came about. Whether we came about in one place or whether we came about in a wide region. And recently, a paper coming out sort of synthesizing a lot of data that we have, argues that humans did not originate in one single population, as has been suggested by some. This is a study by Eleanor Scarry et al. In the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution. And there's a great article that we'll link in the blog post by Ed Young at The Atlantic. So in episode 18, we did briefly sort of mention that there's this classic notion, and anytime you talk about a new species, there's this classic image of a single population gives rise to these new traits, and then you end up with this new species eventually. And for a long time, that's essentially how we have supposed Homo sapiens arose. But these authors argue for another idea that has been proposed before, called multi-regionality. And what they point out is that when you look at fossil information about ancient humans, cultural information, artifacts and such, those seem to show that the various traits that we associate with humans, with Homo sapiens, didn't all appear in one place. That different features seem to show up at different places at different times very early on in the history of our species. We have early humans in places like Morocco, South Africa, and Ethiopia that show different parts of what it means to be Homo sapiens. In the past, people have suggested these might be different species or different subspecies with different anatomical features and more specialized tools. But what these authors are suggesting, linking back to this idea, the multi-regionality hypothesis, is that you had this ancestral species, Homo heidelbergensis or whatever it would have been, that was already spread across Africa, And the different populations evolved different traits. And then as the climate of the continent shifted and the environments of the continent shifted over time, the different populations would reconnect and then be separated and then reconnect. So they were split off long enough to evolve new traits, develop new tools or some such, and then reconnected often enough to keep mixing the culture and mixing the genetic information so that all of the traits that it takes to be Homo sapiens gradually accumulated across these populations all across the continent.
Interesting.
And it appears, they suggest, that all of the Homo sapiens modern human features didn't come together until 100,000 years ago or later. So for a long time, early Homo sapiens were sort of a hodgepodge in the making almost.
It's hard not to hear this and avoid picturing there being different groups of people and one having like hairless human legs and another group having hairless human arms. Another group having human noses.
Yeah, and one group with like, I thought of it. Oh, and one group wearing glasses.
Yes. One group has a hammer, another group has nails.
Yep. Yes. One group has peanut butter, one group has jelly.
It's chocolate and peanut butter.
Yep. So they're basically saying, look, all the evidence is pointing at this hypothesis over that other one. But they do point out that one of the hiccups in this hypothesis, while all this other data synthesized seems to support this, genetic studies so far do not really offer a lot of support for this. In fact, a lot of genetic studies point to a single origin of Homo sapiens at younger dates than the fossil record suggests.
Interesting.
And these authors point out that this might be because either we don't have a lot of data, or our models are looking for a single origin. So that's why we keep finding one. Mm-hmm. But if we expand the model, and that's essentially what they're hoping that this synthesis will do. They call it a call to arms, right? See if we can start exploring a bit more, find more fossil evidence, because our fossil evidence of early humans only comes from limited space around the continent, and change, maybe use different genetic methods to test this particular hypothesis and see if we can find a way to address it with DNA specifically.
Very cool.
So it's a synthesis paper and then essentially saying, all right, everybody, prove this wrong.
Yes.
Like, see what you can do. Here's all the data. Now argue. Let's figure this out.
The gauntlet is set. That's very cool. Review papers are always interesting because they put to use the almost pure data papers that can come out where it's just we measured, we studied, we analyzed, and here are our results. And they'll often make conclusions within that, but the bulk of the paper is just this huge amount of data.
Yep.
And so it's cool when you have researchers who just take all these other papers and combine them to just see what that, it's like overlaying maps. It's just seeing, okay, what new picture do we get when they're all looked at the same time? It's also a very cool solution to the origin of humans that they've suggested. That's a very interesting concept of us being far enough apart to slightly differentiate but never be completely speciated.
Yes.
And that's very interesting. It's also the genetics and physical data not always wanting to agree is something that pops up fairly often, where studying the bones, studying the genes can tell you two vastly different things.
Yep, until you figure out where the disconnect is and line them back up.
And we're still trying to fully understand the complete aspects of how DNA works and how it can be expressed. So there's a lot there to unravel. But that's I like that they acknowledged, here is the issue. All right, everybody, figure it out.
Yeah,
That's
let's
cool.
hold hands and move into the future of understanding
Yes.
our past.
I like this. It's a cool concept that they propose. I like this paper just because this is a very nice representation of how science should always function.
Yeah.
Like, this is perfect example, and I love it. Very cool. Well, my next bit is about how fish mate, or at least how they originally developed claspers to be mating with, or something very similar to them. This is a bit of study about a very well preserved early jawless fish that shows signs of both claspers and pelvic bones. Paired pelvic limb type bones. And it's earlier than was expected to find these things, which is cool. This research is being done by Marion Chevronet et al. And the article I'm reading, very conveniently, is from the conversation written by Marion Chevronet, but also John Long.
Okay.
And the two of them in this article describe, and they give a nice background, which I very much appreciated, that the reason this finding is so important and surprising is that typically, as we discussed in our placoderms episode,
episode 29,
that placoderms are the earliest vertebrates to show paired back limbs and the signs of clasper-like structures. And claspers, for anyone who does not remember the term or is not familiar with them, are nowadays mainly seen in sharks and rays, are mating structures. They're a paired mating structure that the shark or ray can use to dock, to mate with the female, and they clasp, they can lock in, and they can either use both or they can swing them out to the side to be able to mate from either edge, or either side, depending on which fin they bit onto on the female. It's typically how it works with sharks. Placoderms seem to have had very similar clasper-like structures, and they're the first vertebrates we see with this kind of anatomy, as well as the paired back limbs, the pelvic fins, until the discovery of this specimen. Now, this is not a new species. This is Euphaneropes, which is a Devonian jawless fish that's actually very well known. It was described long ago. It's been known for quite a while, but this specimen is ridiculously well preserved to show more detail than had been seen before. This is a specimen found at the Megusa site in Quebec, Canada, and it is preserved in estuary sediments, very fine, river and stream sediments that have preserved just about every element, they were saying.
Very nice.
You can see the picture of it when you go to the article that'll be linked, and it's really cool. When they took a closer look, they saw that it had hind limb structures. Now, they're not identical. They are called pelvic discs. And so they're just these very small, simple structures, but they are where the back limbs would be. And next to those, very tiny, look like two very clasper-like elements.
Interesting. So it has claspers and quote, back legs, kind of,
Yes.
but bony back fins.
Yes, absolutely. And so it has structures that until now had been mostly linked to placoderms. And one of the reasons this is kind of a big upset within the clasper community is
clasper enthusiasts
is that because placoderms were the first ones to show it, and placoderms are the jawed fish, the appearance of jaws and the appearance of claspers and back limbs had kind of been linked. And that had been the mentality and the thought of it for quite a long time. This completely throws that out the window, because this is a jawless fish. So this is pre-jaw, and if these structures are indeed little back legs and little back claspers, then that's something that happened before jaws and is not linked to them, at least not wholly linked to them.
Right.
And this is another cool connection that they found. So this fish, the preservation really revealed a lot of cool things. When looking at it, they also noticed some differentiation in the backbone, in the axial skeleton, that there seems to be some separation between the segments, and that there is a little bit of noticeable difference.
Like thoracic, pelvic,
yes,
caudal.
Yeah, so like if you were to look at a human spine, or more accurately, if you were to take a bone from someone's spine, ask first. But if you were, and you were to show it to a chiropractor or a person who works on the spine, or a person who studies ape bones, they would be able to tell you roughly where on the back it was. And if they know it well enough, they'll probably be able to tell you what number it is.
For human bones? Absolutely.
Yeah, because our spine changes as we go because the bones are having to do slightly different jobs. The lower backbones aren't holding ribs, but the upper ones are, and blah, blah, blah. Well, that differentiation is not common among fish. It's very common among land animals, tetrapods. That's a very common feature in many animals. Not all, but many of them. But it's very rare in fish. The fact that this early jawless fish had it is kind of weird. And to look a little deeper into it, they took a closer look at the modern lamprey, one of the modern jawless fish, and saw that it even had very slight, similar sections, differentiations.
Huh.
So there's something there. And then they also refined the phylogenetics of this fish by using this specimen.
As you do.
I'm doing this as a side note, but it's probably a big deal for people doing taxonomy, but it is part of the anaspids. I have to make sure I say that and not anapsids, because I first read it and I'm like,
"Yep,
that's
not, turtle.
That's not for." And then I finally was like, "Oh, the S."
Yep.
This fish had been placed within the anaspids, which very early jawless fish, common in the Silurian to the Devonian. 427 to 400 million years is their range. And beforehand, there had been some debate on whether this was definitely within that group or not, and there had been debate on exactly how well formed this group was, but their phylogenetics placed it firmly within this group and confirmed that it was a monophyletic, meaning that it was not broken up between other lineages. It was a true branch of the tree of life.
Yes.
Which is that's a cool thing to be able to do.
It's cool to find. It's always fun when we find that certain features are more ancient than we realize they are.
Yeah.
In this case, not only the hind limb structures and the claspers, but that vertebrae differentiation, that sort of precursor to what you see in all land vertebrates nowadays.
Yes.
That goes back before jaws showed up.
Yeah, who saw that coming?
That's really, really cool.
And the researchers make the point that they hope this will spark people to go back and take closer looks at the other specimens of this fish and similar fish that maybe we just weren't looking close enough because we were able to see it because this is a nice one. Maybe we can find it if we actually know what to look for.
Yeah, when you said they went and looked at the lamprey, that's a modern fish.
Yes.
That we hadn't noted. And every now and then it's super neat when a fossil makes us look again at a living organism and realize we missed something.
Yeah.
That's a really cool side effect.
I really enjoyed this one just because it was like, we found this. We also found this. Also, we just did this while we were at it. Just refined the phylogenetics.
Yes. Fish. Pretty cool stuff. Well, our last bit of news for the episode, is one of the top 3 bits of news we have ever had on the podcast.
This one is cool.
Last episode, I made the comment that snakes rarely make the news. And when they do, it's usually about them biting somebody or something, some nonsense.
I actually, after you had made that, I saw a thing on Facebook that came up of like, person has close call with cottonmouth.
It's always, every
and
week
I was just like,
those.
Come on.
But fossil snakes almost never make the news. Dear listeners, let me tell you about one of the best fossil snakes ever. A baby snake preserved in Cretaceous amber. What? This is research put out by Lida Xing et al. In Science Advances. We're going to put up an article, National Geographic, by John Pickrell. Lida Xing has been going around the amber markets and finding really exciting pieces of amber for several years now. So we talked about the tick in amber.
I was about to say, she showed up in the news before.
Also the baby bird wings, the enantiornith wings, the dinosaur tail with the feathers on it. That's all Xing and colleagues.
It's all Lida.
All Lida. This time, they have found a piece of amber with what appears to be the first ever definite fossilized baby snake.
It's a cool sentence.
In amber. You've got this whole run of the body. It's about 2 inches long. There are 97 vertebrae preserved along the length of this snake. It appears to have been brand new, like a newborn, either out of an egg or live birth, whichever one it did. It does not have a skull, which is unfortunate. That is not preserved in there. Because even when it's in amber... all we get is vertebrae. That's it. It's the whole snake fossil record. You can't give us anything else.
It's a conspiracy. The reptilian rulers.
Snakes don't have skulls.
They cannot have our skulls. They must not know our secrets.
Never. However, they do have enough to have named it a brand new genus and species, Sciaophis myanmarensis.
Oh, good. Cool name.
It's just under 100 million years old, as all Burmese amber is. It's very exciting, not only because it is an really ancient, really wonderful snake specimen, it's also from a terrestrial environment, right? Amber is tree sap. This was a forested environment. Most of the good snake fossils from the Cretaceous are aquatic snakes, as we discussed in episode 3. The other thing, add on to this study, is a separate piece of amber that has a piece of what appears to be snake skin preserved in it, which may or may not be the same species. That's very difficult to tell. But it's got this snake-like scale pattern, and it's got this light and dark banding structure. So we've got 2 specimens of snake and amber, which makes me very excited to have them look for more snakes in amber.
Yeah.
That is all I ever wanted.
What you said about it being terrestrial was my first thought when it was a snake in amber. It's like, well, amber is tree sap. Mm-hmm. So it's no guarantee this was an arboreal snake, but it was on land. And it'd sure be cool if it was an arboreal snake.
Yeah, that I don't think they know. That can be very tough to tell.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be very hard to pin down whether the snake lived on the ground or in the tree, but that's what arboreal means for anyone.
Yes, in trees.
Yeah.
There have been some studies done. I remember Michelle Lawing did a study presented at SVP one year looking at geometric morphometrics, so comparing the shape of snake vertebrae, and was able to at least partially differentiate aquatic versus terrestrial versus arboreal versus digging fossorial as well.
Whoa, okay, that's actually
so there's
impressive.
Potential, but I don't know how much further that research went.
That's cool. I love stuff like that.
So maybe someday. They'd have to get the bones out, though, to do that. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I really look forward to when we can, like, because this is not to bash on our CT scanning abilities, but I really look forward to when CT scanning will be either further automated or even higher resolution to where you don't even have to need to do that. Because we're not quite
don't even have to dig
there.
Anymore.
Yeah, because we're not quite there. Because like I tried to use some of the bones for alligators when it came to CT scans, and the resolution is just not quite there to do detailed analysis.
At least not on the machines that most people have access to. I've seen some really nice amber scans. Not everybody gets to do a really nice scan.
I'm looking for I was having a conversation with a person about it came to 3D printing. I look forward to when we can all just have our inkjet / 3D printer in our office because the technology has just come so far that it is mundane. I look forward to the same thing with CT scanning, to where it will just be all right, well, go to the department's CT scanner and we'll get it done. And you'll just be able to do that.
And you have to fight for time on the 3D scanner.
Yes.
Come on.
Who left this on the scanner?
We reserved a 3D scanner room. Take it out into a field and destroy it.
That's when it's an annoyance is what I look forward to.
Yes, exactly.
Not when it's a miracle.
What this miracle of technology won't respond to my commands.
When you cost me 10 extra minutes.
This case, they actually used X-ray scans to confirm it, which may have been CT, or probably some kind of CT scan.
Yeah, CT is like a catch-all term for a lot of different scanning. Like that's not a single term, and I don't know what all of them are.
And one final note, just to give you a sense of what this, you'll see the picture in the article, but when they got it from fossil dealers, the little baby snake was thought by the dealer to be a little centipede or millipede.
Oh,
it's so tiny. Is this a little tiny snake?
So cute. I'm amazed by how tiny especially reptiles, baby animals can be.
Yeah, they get super little.
It's just like how your leg is like a hair.
And that's why they don't fossilize.
Yeah.
And that's why even when you get fossils, there's no
if
such
you
thing
breathe
as a
on them
snake skull,
wrong.
apparently. Yeah. The dinosaur sneezed and from 30 feet away, and the snake's little body just shuddered apart.
It's that dinosaur.
It was like scanners.
Yes. It's that dinosaur. When we were talking about coprolites, the urine fossil. It's just wiped out. Lots of little
That's
baby.
what you can give me dinosaur pee fossils, but
Yep.
you can't give me the skull.
Nope.
Thanks, fossil record.
It just isn't done, David. It just
simply
isn't
not
done.
Anyway, that's the news, which means it is time to head on over to the other side of the world from where we are,
Indeed.
to a little place you may have heard of called Madagascar. Madagascar is an island in the Indian Ocean just off the east coast of Africa. You are probably rather familiar with Madagascar. I'm assuming everybody that's listening has at least heard of Madagascar and knows a little bit of what makes it famous. But here are a few things that make it very interesting. For one, before we get to the cool biological stuff, which is a lot, Madagascar is very big.
It is.
For an island, it is just under 600,000 square kilometers, or just under 230,000 square miles, which makes it the fourth largest island in the world.
Yeah, it's large.
Yes, and it's got a couple hundred smaller islands surrounding it.
It's also got a cool shape. I always liked its shape because it looks like it's got little bump legs and a little face.
Yes, like
it was always
a little pickle.
It was one of my favorite parts of when I was learning the parts of the globe. Like, Madagascar looks cool.
And partially because of its size, Madagascar also has a very wide range of environments on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, for me, whenever I picture Madagascar in my head, I think, rainforest.
Yep.
Tropical rainforest, Madagascar, sure. But that's not the case everywhere in Madagascar. It is tropical in some places. It's temperate in other places. It's dry and arid in yet other places. The ecosystems that exist there include rainforests. There are rainforests there. There are dry forests. There's also a Madagascar-specific kind of forest called the spiny forests.
Yeah.
Which are full of arid adapted plants. Arid meaning very dry conditions. Only a kind of forest found only on Madagascar.
What all this means is that Madagascar is an ideal place to set video games.
Yes.
Like when you play a Pokemon game or another game where it's like, Wasn't I just in the desert? Why is it snowing here?
Yes.
It's because you're in Madagascar.
You're Madagascar. Wait. So there's forested environments. There's deserts. There are grasslands. C4 grasslands.
Aha.
Which, as we all know, are grasses that use a method of photosynthesis that is more efficient in dry environments.
That blows stuff up.
That blows stuff up. Big thanks to Allie from episode 38 for teaching us about grasses.
Yes.
We're
using it.
We're applying our knowledge. Madagascar has plateaus. There are mountains as high as 2,800 meters. There's volcanic activity on Madagascar. There are mangrove swamps. There's coral reefs off the coast. There's tons of coastline because it's an island. This is a very diverse environmental place. There's a lot going on this one island.
Which is like, that's cool for a region in general. You know, like when California has vast differences between the northern portion and the southern portion, you get cool stuff, but condensed onto an island makes for some really interesting scenarios. Because now you can have, as we discussed in Island, you know, when we discussed islands.
Yep, episode 4.
You now can have island specialization within all of those things, which you don't usually get to have.
Yes. Which brings us to the biology of modern-day Madagascar.
Oh, boy.
So here's a vocabulary word for everybody. Endemism. An endemic species is a species that is only found in one place. There are tons of species endemic to Madagascar. In fact, between the plants and the animals, more than 90% of the species on Madagascar are endemic to Madagascar. Found there and nowhere else.
It's why so many documentaries, when they go there, describe it as a prehistoric or alien feeling, or all those terms to say it doesn't look like anywhere else because this stuff isn't anywhere else.
Yes. According to the World Wildlife Foundation, between 1999 and 2010, 615 new species were discovered in Madagascar. Because Madagascar is ridiculous.
Oh, man.
One of the reasons, of course, that it's so strange is that it is separate. It's separated from Africa by like 400 kilometers. That's the closest major landmass to it. So all these species that are on here have had a very long time to develop. And as we'll see in a bit, Madagascar has been isolated for a very long time.
Yeah. It's a stable island.
And when you have a separated landmass, there are two ways to get groups of animals or plants or whatever onto that island, onto that landmass. Either what's called vicariance, which means you were there from the beginning and you rode this landmass as it formed, or dispersal. You made your way somehow across an ocean.
I just get a picture of animals arguing over that.
Yes, we've been here since the Cretaceous.
My ancestors rode Madagascar to this.
Yes, that'd be like in India.
Yep,
My ancestors rode India up here to Asia.
Yep. They were here when it collided.
So Madagascar, not only do you have species that have been isolated here and able to evolve separately, you also have limited access to this landmass. Not all groups of animals have been able to make it here. So, for example, if we look at mammals, there are only, not counting what humans have since brought over, 5 groups of mammals that have made it to Madagascar.
Yeah.
Rodents have made it because
we love to share.
Because rodents were there before us even.
Oh, they were?
Yep. We did not we introduced like pigs and stuff.
Okay.
But rodents were native.
I take back my shade.
Tenrecs have made it there. Tenrecs are sort of rodent-like, but they're closer to things like shrews. Bats have made it there because bats.
Yeah.
Of course, because no mammal disperses as nicely as bats. You
nope.
just fly there. And then 2 others that I want to talk about just a little bit. One is a group called the euplerids, which are carnivorans. Carnivorans are the group that includes dogs, cats, bears, weasels. But none of those have made it to Madagascar. So the euplerids have made it. And the euplerids include such Madagascar species as Malagasy mongooses, which are not mongooses, Malagasy civets, which are not civets, and the fossa.
Oh, the fossa.
Fossa. Ooh. Do it again. Fossas are really cool. So euplerids are, I believe, somewhat related to herpestids or vivarids. So like true mongooses. I think meerkats are in that group. Fossas are the largest mammal carnivores on Madagascar. They grow to as much as 15 to 20 pounds, which is, for an island, not too bad.
That's respectable.
And as the dominant predators, they have become strongly convergent with cats.
Yep.
So they have a similar shape to cats. They're very good climbers. They have retractable claws.
Yeah.
Like cats. I've read them described as similar to a small cougar.
And they have very similar look to like a very small big cat.
Yes,
Exactly. Their face is slightly off. Like if you were to see one, you wouldn't question it until you looked closely at the face, and it's just a little long, a little different shaped. But the body looks real similar unless you know what to look for.
Yes, and we talked about this in that island episode that you get different groups rising to different niches. This is the dominant carnivore on Madagascar, a land where you have no dogs and no cats and no bears. This is as predatory as the mammals get.
It's because when you have especially a large ecosystem, every niche needs to be filled. So someone's got to do it, and it's just whoever fills it first is often the one that keeps it on islands, and it can be weird candidates sometimes.
Yeah, and among mammals, this is the only carnivorine group that made it there. The fifth group of mammals that are there natively, for a long time, are probably the most famous group of animals on Madagascar, which are the lemurs.
Yeah.
Lemurs are a group of primates. They are not monkeys. They're outside the group that includes monkeys. Lemurs include things like the indri and eyes.
Zabumafu.
Yep, exactly. Lemur. If you've seen the movie Madagascar, those are lemurs. The primates in that movie are lemurs.
Yep.
These are the only primates that made it to Madagascar. So in a land without monkeys and without apes to compete with them, the lemurs have expanded to nearly 100 species, ranging from little things that are about 30 grams.
It's ridiculous.
Up to lemurs that weigh more than 20 pounds or so. They are only found on Madagascar. This is the group of primates that has taken over Madagascar. So you have a unique group of primates, you have a unique group of carnivores that dominate this landscape.
It's really interesting to see how all of these niches have been filled by such a limited amount of animals. And you get some really weird answers to things that we're used to over here. The lemurs have filled the roles, and it can get kind of creepy sometimes, but it's cool.
It is. In the reptile side of things,
the best side of things,
Madagascar is home to 2/3 of the world's chameleons.
Yeah, it is.
It has been suggested in the past, actually, that chameleons may have started on Madagascar, but that has since been questioned, I believe. So I don't know that that's necessarily thought to be true.
Interesting.
But my goodness, if you want to study chameleons, you go to Madagascar. Mm-hmm. Everything from the little pygmy chameleons up to more, larger, more showy species. Tons of them. There's lots of other lizards there. Snakes are a really interesting case in Madagascar because just like the mammals, only a few groups of snakes have been able to make it to the island. So you have mainly colubrids, which are most of your snakes. There are some colubrid snakes living there. You have boas, and you have blind snakes.
Cool.
But that's pretty much it, which means there are no dangerously, which is dangerous to humans, venomous snakes on Madagascar.
Yeah.
Because there are no vipers, there are no elapids. These are tropical rainforests you could walk through without having to worry about being killed by a snake bite.
If a snake was in your shoe or under your tarp or wherever, you just let it go away and
Kick it
knock
out.
it out of the boot. Yep, and that's it.
Yeah, there are venomous snakes on Madagascar, but they're not venomous enough that people would really have to worry about them. At least not as far as I know.
We have a cat-eyed snake at the aquarium, and they're one of the rear fanged, if I remember right.
Yeah, the fangs are toward the back, as opposed to the big ones in a rattlesnake.
So they have to bite you and then sit there and go, and so it's not the same threat level as the giant bared fangs that I can hit you with and then leave.
And a lot of snakes that are there's a lot of rear fang snakes that are not powerfully venomous. Like, dangerous if you're a shrew, but for people, it's no big deal.
There's a lot of those that we didn't even know they were venomous until it was discovered by accident. That's what happened with the hognose and stuff, where someone got bitten and went, "Oh, my thumb feels funny."
It's a little bit of venom in here.
Yep, but before that, we didn't know because it wasn't substantial.
There is an exception. There are actually venomous snakes near Madagascar because there are sea snakes that live in the oceans around there.
And if you're gonna have venomous snakes nearby, that's a
pretty
good
cool choice.
Option. Yeah,
that's a good choice. Sea snakes tend not to be too aggressive, but they're crazy venomous. Don't get bit by a sea snake.
But they got like really small fangs, so I know they can't get through like most wetsuits. It's very much like the box jellyfish where you can protect yourself with pantyhose.
Yep,
cool stuff. It's all neat.
Speaking of aggressive reptiles, there is one species of crocodilian that lives today on Madagascar. Will, do you know what it is?
Is it the Nile?
It is the Nile croc.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Nile crocs, which are almost the biggest crocs we have around in the world today.
Yeah, they're basically tied for the saltwater or estuarian crocs from Australia and the Philippines. Mm-hmm. They both get to about the same length. The saltwater, I think, gets heavier, but they're also notably fat for crocs. So
yeah,
that's a thing about them. Nile crocodiles are big.
Yeah, they're like 4 or 5 meters.
Yeah, they can get very close to 20 foot when they are old, and that's big enough.
Which means that they are the largest predators in Madagascar. Nile
as
crocs
it should be.
As big as it gets in Madagascar.
This is an island where everything is put right.
Yes, all this sounds great to me so
yes.
far. We got lemurs. We got
I can play with all the snakes.
Not a cat. All this. Yeah, exactly. You just go out, you pick them up.
Ooh, another one.
There's a bunch of endemic tortoises on Madagascar. There's at least 100 species of endemic birds. There's a ridiculous number of endemic frogs.
Yeah, they got a lot of amphibians.
Yep, absolutely. There are, I read, at least 100 species of endemic fish, including 2 endemic families.
What?
Of fish. There might be endemic families of things like frogs, too. That wouldn't surprise me. But at least the fish. Yep.
Wow.
There are over 600 endemic snails.
Aw, that's cute.
And some unholy number of insects and spiders.
Yep.
That are found only on Madagascar. This is one of the world's top centers of biodiversity.
It's such an amazing field test. You know, a big island, diverse ecosystems, limited diversity of initial groups. Yes. And you just take a few. It's basically like, I used to have mental dreams where it's like, if I could create planets and I could just pick out the most interesting animals to me on Earth today and put them there, how would they balance things? And that's basically what happened here. And
yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, you get something called the founder effect,
where
what you eventually get is limited by what you started with. If you only get a handful of creatures with a specific set of genetic diversity, that's what you're working from.
Yeah.
And that will limit what you can get in the future.
Yeah, if you don't
all the primates are lemurs, because that's what you started with, was a lemur.
If you don't start with a snake a group that is known for potent venom, you may not get potent venom.
Yep.
It's not in the card, so it's likely that you won't go down that path.
Yes. Now, of course, the croc, and we should, I guess, specify this. Nile crocs are not endemic to Madagascar.
No.
Those
Crocs
are
can
all
drink
over
salt
Africa.
water.
Yep, they just
So,
float across.
so islands are no problem for them.
Now, our friend Allie would be upset with us if I did not also mention that Madagascar is home to a ridiculous amount of plants.
Weird plants there because they're not found other places.
I believe it was on the WWF site. That's the World Wildlife Foundation, not the wrestling people.
I thought the same thing the first time you said it.
There are over 11,000 endemic plants, including at least 5 families of plants that are found only there.
And that makes sense because an animal could fly or swim across the sea that separates. Plants don't have a lot. There are ones who can do it, but once you're on a piece of dirt as a plant, that's where you're going to be.
That's where you are. Well, and with all those different environments, that's incredible opportunity for plants. Multiple different kinds of forest, all different grasslands, lots of elevations. It's what they do.
Because they can't.
That is how the plant do.
Traverse from the desert to the dry forest. So if I'm in I'm growing in the desert.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Lots of orchids, lots of palms. There is a famous type of tree there called the traveler's palm, which is not a palm. Sometimes just called the traveler's tree. There's a lot of things in Madagascar that are named things that they're not.
Well, it's very much like we were saying with marsupials. It is you're the Madagascar's thing, I know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're like if a palm was on. Well, there are palms on Madagascar. You're like if there was a civet on Madagascar.
If I were to make a friend in Madagascar, I go, "Hi, Madagascar, David."
Yes,
that's how it works.
Madagascar is also. We mentioned this last episode that famous story of how Darwin saw a plant, and because of the depth beneath the petals of where the nectar was stored, he guessed that there must be an insect with a super long proboscis. Those are from Madagascar.
Yeah,
that's Darwin's orchid. And Morgan's sphinx moth is the moth with the crazy long proboscis that reaches inside the orchid.
Cool name.
And finally, we should mention while talking about the diversity of Madagascar, it is more recently home to another group of primates. There are 21 million humans that live on Madagascar, the Malagasy people, who themselves are split into a whole bunch of different ethnic groups. So humans on Madagascar are actually rather diverse and abundant as well.
Yeah, because it's not every human that is there is a person who's colonized it in recent history. There's going to be people who are there long ago.
Indeed.
And that's cool.
Speaking of which, let us now rewind the clock and go back to the early days of Madagascar.
We need to do the effect that the documentaries all do, where everything starts, slowly breaking down. We watch the buildings be debuilt, and
yes, imagine the clouds rise up. The sun goes the opposite direction really, really fast. Let's take a look at the geologic history of Madagascar, starting way at the beginning. The geology of Madagascar is full of super ancient metamorphic rocks from the Archean and the Proterozoic. Go back to our geologic history, but we digress after episode 13. The foundation of Madagascar is way, 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 way back in time. So this isn't an island like Hawaii, like the big island of Hawaii that was formed several million years ago. Madagascar is a land mass that has been around for a very, very, since the earliest days of continental mass on the planet Earth.
Yes, and it's a big part of what makes it stable. It's not going to just erode away because it's been rock for a very long time.
Yes. For pretty much the entire Paleozoic era, that is from 500 plus million years ago down to the 250 mark, Madagascar was part of Gondwana. So Gondwana was, and we've talked about this when we talked about continents in the past, Gondwana was the southern supercontinent. So the land masses that today are Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, were all part of one basically large supercontinent in the south, which we call Gondwana. Once you got toward the end of the Paleozoic, Gondwana combined with the northern continents to become Pangaea.
Pangea.
Pangea. So Madagascar has not been separate for all this time. It was part of another larger continent. The fossil record on Madagascar before the end of the Paleozoic is not great. In fact, the fossil record on Madagascar for most of Madagascar's history is not super rich. There are a few places throughout the history of Madagascar where you get really good fossil remains. And one of those times is the Permian and Triassic.
Cool
so
times.
Spanning across 250 million years ago, there are some deposits with some really cool Permian and Triassic fossils, including early synapsids, that is the mammal line, so things like rhynchosaurs, early dinosauromorphs, like a creature called a Zendosaurus. You also have a lot of early reptiles, early ancestors of marine reptiles, also an extinct reptile called Coelurosaurus, which is one of a short list of gliding reptiles from this time period, is found on Madagascar. Cool. It was originally identified as a different genus, but it has since, I believe, been combined with Coelurosaurus. And you have temnospondyls, which are the big terrestrial, big partially terrestrial amphibians. You've got lots of fish. You've got lots of plants. So Madagascar actually offers us this nice glimpse into the Permo-Triassic time frame, and it's at a time where the creatures we saw and the plants we saw in Madagascar were fairly similar to what we find at that time in other parts of Gondwana, because they were all one landmass at the time. This is a time before Madagascar became unusual.
Before it was Madagascar.
Yes, this is the origin story. Once Madagascar was just like everybody else.
And nobody cared until I left the continent.
Speaking of which, shortly after the Triassic, as we move into the Jurassic, Pangea begins to break up. So around the late Jurassic into the early Cretaceous, so 160 million years ago, and moving over the next, tens of millions of years, Gondwana begins to break, and it begins with Madagascar, India, and Antarctica, because India used to be down there too, splitting away from Africa and South America. By around 115 million years ago, Antarctica splits off, and this leaves Madagascar attached to India. And this surprised me, because I did not realize that. I always kind of assumed Madagascar was part of Africa that broke off.
Yeah.
But it was, but not most recently.
Yes. Oh, that's cool.
Madagascar was attached to India for a long stretch of time before finally splitting again.
So they both broke off, and then India left it behind.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they started moving north, and India shot off north toward Asia, and Madagascar floated over.
Madagascar was the fuel tank that the old Apollo rockets.
Yes, India dropped the fuel tank and shot off.
And fell into the atmosphere.
In the rock record, in Madagascar, we see around 88 million years ago, so getting toward the end of the Cretaceous, flood basalts. Now, basalts are a type of igneous rock, and flood basalts are what you get when you have a period of very extensive lava. So we talked about these in episodes 5 and 15, talking about extinction-level volcanic activity, where you get these vast plains of lava that harden into basalts. The flood basalts in late Cretaceous Madagascar are thought to be from the rifting that separated India from Madagascar.
That makes sense.
So around 88 million years ago, Madagascar splits off from India. Later on, it would resuture to the African plate, but not on the continent of Africa. So it remains about 400 kilometers away from Africa across the ocean.
Yeah, so basically that means that now Africa and Madagascar will move together, but not toward or away from one another.
Yeah, they're not connected anymore.
Yeah.
So Madagascar, starting 88 million years ago, Madagascar has been on its own, which means for all of the Cenozoic, and a good chunk of the Cretaceous as well. For a while, it was thought that there may have been lingering connections, what the old school geologists would call land bridges, between Madagascar and these other continents, but more recent research suggests that is not the case, that it has been off on its own for this long.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a long stretch to connect. So that would have been very interesting if had there been land bridges.
Yes, it would. Not much is known about Madagascar, or for that case, India, for most of the Cretaceous. So most of the development of Madagascar in that time period, shortly before it splits and so much of what happened on Madagascar in that time period, shortly before it split away and then shortly afterwards, isn't understood very well. In 2013, the earliest dinosaur fossil, Cretaceous dinosaur fossil, was found on Madagascar. An abelisauroid, a carnivore, named Dahalokeli tokana, which was a carnivore about 10 to 12 feet long, comes from 90 million years ago, so just before the split. This is our one little glimpse right before Madagascar split away. This dinosaur is known from 7 vertebrae and a few ribs, so not a whole lot, just a little glimpse.
I would love someday for paleoartists to just draw the section of the body that was, and just be a rack of ribs laying on the ground.
Talk about speculative evolution.
Just a hunk of this dinosaur on the ground.
So this is the first dinosaur known from the time period where you had Indo-Madagascar by itself. This is our little glimpse into the dinosaur fauna of that time. But then after that, Madagascar splits. And it is after that time, in the latest Cretaceous, that Madagascar becomes home to an excellently preserved fauna in the northwestern part of the island in a formation called the Mevarano Formation. And here we're going to slow down our trip through time for a moment and zoom in on this, the coolest of fossil places in Madagascar.
Just zoom right in there.
In northwestern Madagascar, in the semi-arid grasslands of the Mahajanga Basin, there is a site where researchers find layer upon layer of wonderfully preserved late Cretaceous fossils. This is a site that has been excavated for a very long time by groups of researchers from Stony Brook University, which is back up in my old stomping grounds on Long Island. The site dates to the Maastrichtian, which is about 70 million years ago in this case, shortly before the KPG mass extinction. We're like right before the end of the age of dinosaurs, and about 20 million years above those flood basalts. Oh. So Madagascar has been separated from all the other landmasses by this time for about 20 million years, and the researchers find a whole bunch of really interesting fossils here, many of which seem to be closely related to fossil relatives in India and South America.
Very cool.
There are many fossiliferous layers here that suggest a semi-arid environment. So you've got a lot of oxidized paleosols, you've got a lot of calcium carbonate-rich soil, which are things you tend to see in dry climates. You also see a lot of plants with vertical roots in the soils, which is something that you see in arid living plants.
Mm-hmm. Reaching down instead of out.
Yeah, reaching down to find more moisture, exactly. And there's evidence in these layers of a seasonal climate and varying water flow, which will be important in a little bit. Remember this. This will be on the quiz. But let's talk about what they actually find here. There is a whole ecosystem of really fascinating creatures that are found here. And once again, just like we talked about today, now that Madagascar has split, we have endemism. We have species that are found here and nowhere else. Let's start with the dinosaurs.
The dinosaurs.
Perhaps the most famous dinosaur from the latest Cretaceous of Perhaps the most famous dinosaur from the latest Cretaceous in the northwestern Madagascar is an abellisaurid. So abellisaurs, think Carnotaurus. That's an abellisaur, sort of these short faces, short arms. A large one named Majungasaurus, which was named in 1996.
Majungasaurus.
It's a fun one. They're about 20 feet long, 6 or 7 meters. Similar, a lot of abellisaurs are known from South America. Majungasaurus is interesting because it has this really ornamented skull. Thick with rough textures. It's got a single nose horn. Apparently, when it was first found, the bits of the skull were mistaken for a pachycephalosaur.
Oh, that's cool.
Because it's got this all this rugosity up in the skull.
That's neat.
We have found many skeletons of varying ages, which is really cool because it's allowed people like my friend Dr. Mike Demick to study how this dinosaur grew over its lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
It was apparently a strangely slow-growing theropod. That's pretty cool.
Interesting.
And, very excitingly, because Majungasaurus was the only big predator around, we have tooth marks on other bones that have been assigned to Majungasaurus. Tooth marks on the bones of the local sauropod, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Cool.
And tooth marks on other Majungasaurus bones.
Whoa!
Which makes this one of a very short list of dinosaurs with direct evidence of cannibalism.
That's cool. This was a Madagascar predatory unicorn, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it here, folks. From the Common Descent Podcast. Majungasaurus, the Malagasy predatory unicorn.
It's so much fun. I like weird predators. That's why I like the Ceratosaurus and Carnotaurus. They're weird and they're cool.
Well, if you like weird predators, the smaller theropod on Madagascar that's known pretty well is Masiacosaurus, which is about 6 feet long. This is a smaller dinosaur, but it's the one where the jaws, the dentition curves. So the lower jaw curves down and the upper jaw curves up, so the teeth in the front kind of point forward.
Yeah.
So what exactly it's doing with that? Probably catching some sort of prey. I've seen people suggest it might have been a fish hunter.
Yeah,
with
I've
its
heard
sort of
that
spiky
before.
teeth sticking out. There's also a yet smaller theropod known from Madagascar called Rhonevis, which for a while has bounced around, where does this fit in relation to birds? But it would have looked a lot like Archaeopteryx. Small,
cool.
Covered in feathers, wing-like arms, exactly where it fits. I've seen it listed as a dromaeosaur and other times as simply an early member of that near bird group. It too seems to be related to similar dinosaurs that are found in South America.
Neat. I like when like we talked about with when we went through the gray fossil site, and when you keep finding connections to another locality, just hearing that. I always think that's really enjoyable to just keep having those pop up. It's just like every now and then South America just pokes its head in, and it's cool.
Yeah. And in this case, it was probably because they evolved from similar, not too distant ancestors. There are also bird remains on Madagascar at this time. There's a bird called Vorona. And the last of the dinosaurs we'll mention, My Vorona, is a sauropod, a titanosaur, also very famously many known from South America, named Rhepetosaurus. Rhepetosaurus is estimated to have been about 15 meters long, which it is a sauropod.
Yep.
For a titanosaur, that's not ridiculous.
Mm-mm.
It is a rare case of a nearly complete known skeleton for a titanosaur.
Oh.
And Rhepetosaurus was studied back in 2016 by a bunch of people, including my buddy Dr. Demick, of a baby specimen, which was only like 35 centimeters tall at the hip, like brand new, and they studied how it grew. It appeared to grow rapidly and was probably precocial, which is to say, did not stick around with its parents.
Cool. These are giant long-necked turtles.
Yeah, they just went wandering off like sea turtles.
Cool.
They also found that it likely died of starvation.
Oh.
Remember that for later. In addition to the dinosaurs, Late Cretaceous Madagascar up in the Meverano Formation is also home to a bunch of crocs. Notably, for example, Simosuchus,
Yeah.
which is the pug-nosed croc.
Yeah.
Simosuchus is super bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a croc that has a sort of short pug-shaped face. It's only about 2.5 feet long. Terrestrial crocodilomorph. Small creature living on land. Has leaf-shaped teeth.
Yeah.
Probably for eating veggies.
Yeah, this is one of those weird ones that if you were to glance at it does not look like a croc. But if you were also to glance at the reconstructions, it's the cutest darn thing.
It's adorable. We'll put links up in the blog post.
I want one.
It's also covered in armor.
It's got like these awesome samurai looking plates all down the
on its legs. Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's just this little armored beastie.
It's just
wandering around.
Perfect,
it's like a
dog sized. It fit right in my house. My apartment allows pets.
It even has a pug face.
I just feed it salads. It'd be the best.
It's like a little Edosaur.
Yeah.
They're very much like that.
I want it.
There's another croc called Mahajongasuchus, which is more like 3 meters long. And I've seen it reconstructed more like a modern croc.
Yeah.
And then there are some other crocodiliforms known from this time at this place.
Cool place.
There are also snakes known from the Meverano Formation, notably Madsoia madagascarensis. So in the snake episode 3, we talked about the Madsoids, which were large, sort of boa-like forms. The Madagascar Madsoia is estimated to have been nearly 8 meters long.
Oh my god.
Which, for you American listeners, 25 to 30 feet?
Yeah.
Which puts it in like the top 4 or 5 largest known snakes of all time, which is pretty awesome.
What doesn't Madagascar have?
It's got everything. It's got a croc for you. It's got a snake for me.
It's the best.
There's a bunch of fossil lizards known. There's also one aquatic snake known.
Ooh.
Keliophis, which is a Nigerophiid, about 1 meter long. And, speaking of herps, so before I introduce this next creature, I have to tell you all about frogs. So, if you know amphibians, there is a genus of frogs today called Bufo.
Bufo,
which sounds like a thing a frog would say.
Yep.
Bufo. I think it's Latin for toad, or something nearby that. So there's a bunch of frogs today called Bufo. There's a family called the Bufonids. For a long time, a lot of toad-like frogs were labeled as Bufo. I think a lot of them have been recently sort of reclassified.
Yeah.
But Bufo is sort of synonymous with toad. Okay, there's the background. For a long time, researchers studying fossils in the Meverano Formation found evidence of a giant frog. Now, when I say giant frog, this frog is estimated to have been about 10 pounds, which is a frog the size of my cat.
Yes. It'd be heavier than carrying a gallon of milk.
Yes. Yes. It had an armored skull, big old jaws. They nicknamed it for a long time the Devil Toad.
Yeah, I've heard that nickname pop up.
Then, when it came time to officially name the frog, in 2008, Evans et al., I believe, gave it possibly my favorite genus name of all time. This frog is called Beelzebufo.
Beelzebufo.
I love it so much. It's such a great name. Beelzebufo is the largest known frog in the fossil record. Its jaws were 6 inches across. There was a study that tested its bite force and found that it had a sufficiently impressive bite force. It's just, I love that Madagascar is famous for things in the fossil record that it is also all famous for things today.
Yeah, it's like
frogs.
no, we've been good at this for a while. we know how to do our frogs. I love the image, and I can't get it out of my head, of this frog just launching itself at something with its bony head, just headbutting something down and then just devouring it.
Baby dinosaurs.
Yes, just
Baby
launching
Majungasaurus.
across. Like the human cannonball just knocking into stuff. Awesome.
So you've got big theropods, big sauropods, lots of crocs, snakes, giant frog, probably way more than that in microfossils. There's also a bunch of early mammals, including some members of the famous group, the multituberculates.
Hey.
And a species named just a few years ago, Vintana, a genus of Gondwanatherian mammal that is the largest mammaliform from Mesozoic Gondwana. Now, for mammals in the Mesozoic, that's still, it's not huge, but it was, a chunky little mammal, probably eating seeds and roots and such. And what was really notable about it is that it has this unusual combination of features, some of which are very similar to other mammals across Gondwana. Others are very, very unusual, which the scientists attribute to being on Madagascar.
That's cool.
You're on an island. You're developing weird stuff. There's a lot of creatures here that you just don't see elsewhere.
Well, it's neat that because a lot of islands don't have great fossil records, so you're finding the end result of island effects. But here we can actually get to see a little bit of the beginnings and the early. And that's so cool.
So it was an island in the late Cretaceous when you had island dinosaurs on there. It's an island now. The other thing, I just want to mention this because I think this is really fun. There are also from this time period, there's fish fossils, including coelacanth fossils, which makes Madagascar one of the very few places you can find fossil and living coelacanths.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I just think that's a really cool claim to fame.
Man, all right. So when we establish a central headquarters, we're establishing it in Madagascar, right?
Well, wait till we get to the end of the episode.
All right. Because you're making a hard sell
it's a cool
right
place.
now.
Now, one of the big questions that these researchers had looking at the Meverano Formation was, why do you have these repeated layers of super rich, beautifully preserved, full ecosystem, from dinosaurs to snakes, from crocs to mammals, fossil beds? And what they suspect was happening, because, like I said, there was a seasonal climate, varying water flow, what it looks like was happening was that you were getting mass death during droughts.
Yeah.
That it would get very dry and all these animals would congregate around the limited water supply. They would die. And again, remember, our baby Repetosaurus died of starvation. Mm-hmm. We have cannibalism. These are potential signs of a harsh living environment.
Yeah.
And then, when the rains would return, all the mud, that mud flow would flow down into this basin and bury all of it.
Yeah, just fossilize everything.
So you'd get these repeated, well-preserved death assemblages in these mud flows. We see things like this in today places like Australia today, where you have droughts and the creatures congregate around the little water holes.
Once again, tragedy in the past makes good paleontology.
It does. There's even possible evidence that's been reported of algal spores that might suggest algal blooms. That's research done in part by Mike Zavada, who was at ETSU and at the Gray Site for a while.
Cool.
I was a little surprised to see that name pop up.
Mike?
Mike, my buddy Mike. I don't think I actually ever met Mike, but his name was all around. So there you have it, Thomas. Late Cretaceous Madagascar, a really unusual, thriving at times ecosystem with just some phenomenal repeated preservation throughout.
Periodically
thriving. Periodically a great place to live. It's a good place to visit.
And fossilize.
And to stay forever. You can check out anytime you like.
As I say, forget going to Florida when you want to retire. If you want to really stick around, go to Madagascar.
I want to be in the ground forever.
Just gonna lay down this dry riverbed.
This seems like a good place.
they'll find me. Like, oh, that's so cool. It's got so many neat, weird things from that time. And I really love being able to see earlier on in the effects of being an island to compare to the now effects of being an island.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
It is. But alas, as with all good things in the Mesozoic, they came to an end. Because Madagascar was not spared in the KPG mass extinction. For more on that, episode 5. However, after the Cretaceous, the fossil record of Madagascar mostly drops out almost for the rest of history.
Yeah.
So for most of the last 65 million years, we've scattered fossils throughout. There is notably there's fossils from the Eocene representing a sea cow named Eothyroides, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
There are other sea cow remains, I believe, later on in the Neogene. In the Miocene, there are remains, oceanic remains largely, of things like sharks and rays and crocs. There was a dolphin tooth found not too long ago. There's remains of bats and rodents here and there. So we've kind of got this scattered every now and then, yeah. But we don't have a great picture of a lot of what was going on Madagascar throughout the Cenozoic.
What were you up to, Madagascar?
What were you doing there?
What are you hiding?
What has been happening? Which raises these interesting questions of how did our modern fauna get there?
Mm-hmm.
So like we said, Madagascar has been split from Africa this entire time since the late Cretaceous. Split from Africa and everybody else. No good known connections in that time, which raises the question of vicariance or dispersal.
Yes.
There are some groups of animals that are on Madagascar today that are thought to have had ancestors there all the way back to when it was part of Gondwana. So certain lineages of frogs, lizards, maybe even snakes might indeed just be holdovers from... They've ridden the landmass the whole time.
True Madagascar natives.
Yes, like, you know, it's like people in the United States, like, oh, we've been here since we rode over on the Mayflower. But some of these animals rode on Madagascar.
Yes, we were living on Madagascar before it was an island.
Yes, yeah, before it was tropical. The other option is dispersal, which is to say you came over the ocean, and most creatures come over the ocean by rafting one way or another. So, and we talked about this in episode 4, Island Evolution. There's a lot of ways to follow the currents to make your way from landmass to landmass.
And this question of how did the animals that are on an island get there is something you have to ask with every island.
Yes.
You know, did you get brought here? Did you fly here? Did you swim here? Why are you here? And this is just a bigger example of that.
Yep. Bats and birds are easy to explain.
Yep.
Things like crocs can be a little easier because many of them can cross oceans. But mammals, a lot, sort of terrestrial mammals, terrestrial reptiles, are thought to have rafted over at different times. And there are even some estimates based in part on molecular data, combined with what little we have from fossils. Molecular meaning genetic data. At least one study reported an estimate that lemurs have been on Madagascar since the very early Cenozoic. So, perhaps 60 or more million years ago, their ancestors came over. Carnivorans have been estimated to have been much more recent as about 20 million years ago. During the Miocene, around that same time, is possibly when crocs showed up. Evidence that tortoises and bats also made it over by around that time. And then different groups of lizards, skinks, geckos, our snakes, our birds. Many are estimated to have arrived during the Miocene sometime, within the last 15 to 20 million years.
Interesting.
We also know that grasslands made it to Madagascar, late Miocene or later. If you'll recall from episode 38, grasslands kind of did this thing where they took over the world. Madagascar were not spared. But then around that time, at the end of that time, that 20 to 15 million year period where a lot of these creatures seem to be making it over, there's evidence that the oceanic currents changed.
Oh.
Such that after that time period, it was harder to travel from Africa to Madagascar.
Oh, cool.
And it's been suspected that there has been less oceanic dispersal within the last 10 to 15 million years or so, because the currents are no longer good at traveling, at carrying creatures across that way.
That's fascinating. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So over the course of the Cenozoic, at various times, Madagascar has been seeded, sometimes literally, with what would become to be the modern ecosystems.
And then when the transit was shut down, it was left to its own devices.
Yes, so there has been fewer, most likely, dispersal events into Madagascar. So a limited group made it, then slowed down dispersal, and that is what has created modern fauna in Madagascar, the modern fauna and flora.
Very neat.
And then the fossil record picks up again. The third time period that is very well known in Madagascar is the latest Pleistocene to the Holocene. Good data goes back about as far as 26,000 years. So practically yesterday, geologically, but long enough ago for us to get some really cool late Pleistocene creatures, including some Madagascar megafauna.
Oh, I'm excited.
Many of these taxa, these species, are extinct, but lasted until the last few thousand or even few hundred years.
Whoa.
And most of them, in fact, all the ones that I'm going to list, probably overlapped with humans.
Cool.
The most famous of these, among mammal enthusiasts, so this one's for Ethan, are the giant lemurs.
Yeah.
A group of lemurs, also sometimes called sloth lemurs.
Yeah.
There are least...
It's a cute name.
Yep. There are at least 17 known species of large lemur from Madagascar, some of which lasted to the last few centuries. One of the best known is called Paleopropithecus. There are many, many specimens. It was big, as in 100 pounds or more.
Nice.
For a lemur.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about these lemurs is that they have these extremely curved limb bones that seem to suggest a very suspensory lifestyle. That is to say, instead of, you'll see like some monkeys walking on the branches, and you see apes swinging from branches. Suspensory means you spend a lot of time hanging from branches, like sloths do.
Yes, yes.
Which is why they're called sloth lemurs.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's neat that you see similar features in the bones to show that lifestyle.
Yeah, so Madagascar didn't only fill in its primates. It came up with its own version of sloths.
That's real, and big ones.
Now, whether or not these were slow-moving like sloths, or like modern-day lemurs in Madagascar liked to move it, we don't know.
I knew it was going to make it in at some point.
In fact, we don't know so much that I only brought that up so I could make that joke. One of the largest, in fact, the largest of the giant Madagascar lemurs was Archaeoindris, which was gorilla-sized.
Yeah, I knew they had a couple of, not gorilla mimics, but convergent with large primates.
Yep. Also suspensory. So this was like a 400-pound animal hanging from branches and moving perhaps a lot like a sloth.
I mean, it makes me think of orangutans. They're not quite the suspensory the same way as sloths, but they're very arboreal. They hang instead of walking on branches a lot of the time. Interesting. That's very cool.
There was also a giant eye,
Ooh.
which perhaps twice the size of a modern eye. And a modern eye can be a whopping 5 or 6 pounds.
Yeah.
So this was a 10-pound. So this was an eye about the size of Beelzebufo.
Yep.
if you can imagine.
Which they would ride into battle.
Yes, holding their grooming claw high.
Jousting with their long fingers. The picture of this cat-sized thing that looks like an eye just peeking around at you. Just like,
listen, artists who listen to the podcast, please do us this service.
Please.
So there were a bunch of large lemurs. Madagascar was also home to another endemic group of giants, the elephant birds.
Oh, yeah.
So we talked in the episode 37 and a half about one particular group of giant birds, the terror birds. But huge flightless birds have evolved numerous times. And there was a group of ratites on Madagascar. Ratites includes most of the flightless birds today, like ostriches and emus and such. The elephant birds were among the largest birds ever.
Yeah, they were huge.
Apiornis was perhaps as much as 3 meters tall and over 800 pounds. That's a half-ton bird.
Yeah, that's heavy for an animal, period, let alone a bird.
Yes. That's a huge bird.
It's massive.
They laid eggs that could be a meter wide. That's a 3-foot-long egg, which I think are also the largest eggs in history as well, or close to it.
Jeez.
And in our islands episode, we talked about the phenomenon of island gigantism, that some animals can grow to giant sizes in the lack of predatory pressures.
Yeah.
This could be one of those.
Well, if you don't have grazing ungulates, cows and bison and antelopes, yes, someone's got to walk around and be big and eat plants.
Yeah, someone's got to be the local elephant.
Yep.
Might as well be the birds.
Let's discuss the elephant in the room. There are no elephants in the room. We should do that.
Will, that was very clever. That was a very, very good joke. Wordplay is normally my realm.
Yep.
I'm impressed. Well done, sir.
Oh, thank you.
There was also at least one smaller elephant bird. There's one called Muller-Ornis. There was also an extinct genus of croc.
I like those.
There was a crocodile, a true crocodile,
Ooh, cool.
named Voe robustus.
I like it.
Which was similar in size to a Nile crocodile. 4 to 5 meters, but beefy. This was a robust genus and species of crocodile. They had these little horns on the back of the skull, the squamosal horns.
I knew I recognized the name, but the horned croc. This was a very, very cool one.
I like that it's had weird crocs since the Cretaceous.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a thing Madagascar has always had.
It's just like if someone went back there and they looked over and they see this giant eye looking at them. I'm making eye impressions, so I'm sure it's messing with my voice as I turn away, but I'm turning my head slowly.
Yep.
As if I have giant unmoving eyes.
And then a horned croc.
A giant armored-faced toad jumps by, and then a croc goes by with horns. You're like, yeah, I'm going home.
To be clear, everybody, Beelzebufo and the giant eye missed each other by 70 million years.
Yeah, I know. But that's less fun.
There was a study recently that asked the question whether or not the Nile croc and Voe coexisted, and concluded that they probably didn't. That the Niles probably moved in after Voe disappeared.
Which makes sense. It would be weird to have two large crocs, two equally sized. You don't see that many places where crocodilian species overlap. In South America, the caimans are either eat different things or are different sizes. Because if we're both the same size, we're going to be eating the same thing if we're shaped the same way. So we need to fight each other.
Yeah. Which means that the title of largest predator on Madagascar shifted between Voe and now today the Nile croc has moved in.
Cool.
Some other quick examples of late Pleistocene into early Holocene Madagascarian creatures. There was a giant fossa. As much as 40 pounds or pushing 20 kilograms.
Decent.
That's big. That's pretty big small predator. There are also a few different species of Malagasy pygmy hippos.
Aww.
So we're talking hippos that are maybe 6 feet long.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which might have been island dwarfs.
Yes, yes.
Possibly. We talked about that. The other thing you can get is dwarf versions of large creatures on islands. Also, as with some of the others, the last of the pygmy hippos may have been around as recently as 1,000 years ago. The last of the elephant birds, by the way, were around 1500 AD.
Yeah.
500 years ago, we had elephant birds still on Madagascar.
Very recent.
There's an extinct Malagasy aardvark, which, as we said in the beginning, not an aardvark. It was a tenrec, but cool. Extinct island tortoises. So just like you get in the Galapagos and things like that, big island tortoises. There was a big eagle. There are a number of other extinct species of birds. There was this sort of thriving, as with so many places in the world, late Pleistocene into the Holocene ecosystem in Madagascar.
That everything was awesome and crazy.
But because it was Madagascar, it was even more awesome and crazy.
Yeah.
Like everyone else had elephants and ground sloths. Madagascar had suspensory lemurs and elephant birds.
Everyone's doing pachyderms these days.
Let's do something different. And then, around 2000 BC, 4,000 years ago, is when we get the very earliest evidence of humans showing up in Madagascar. Now, it used to be that we had evidence of humans younger than that, was the oldest evidence, and there were a lot of studies that linked the disappearance of a lot of those creatures to the arrival of humans. But that really old evidence from 4,000 years ago of a group of stone tool making foragers sort of reset that. It pushed the earliest humans on Madagascar back a bit, which suggests that the extinctions may not have been an immediate response to human occupation.
Interesting. The debate swings yet again.
Yes, it does. For more on that, go listen to episode 25 about the late Pleistocene megafaunal extinction.
Yeah, it's a very interesting ongoing theme.
So over the last few hundred to few thousand years, we lost a lot of those cool late Pleistocene Madagascar creatures. The large lemurs, the elephant birds, the horned crocs. We saw the expansion of humans, and with the expansion of humans, the sort of thing you can't talk about an episode of Madagascar without mentioning, the fact that this island, this beautiful island, center of biodiversity, wonderful hotspot of all sorts of cool creatures, is suffering extensive environmental problems.
Yes, it is.
Like all the stuff you get elsewhere without the big dispersal factor of a continent, where you can kind of spread out the effects. As we discussed in episode 4, as we discussed in episode 25, islands get hit hard when mass extinctions hit. Islands get hit hard when ecosystems are suffering. Madagascar has a lot of issues with deforestation. And here's a sad full circle. A lot of trouble with wildlife trade. Because they have so many cool creatures, there's a lot of illegal export and import, and even legal export and import, that puts these ecosystems at risk.
Yeah, it's something that places like Australia also have to regulate, because the illegal pet trade is very hungry for animals that you can't get easily, because it's a jewel in your collection if you have something that no one else has.
Yes, indeed.
It is bad for those species.
It is. So Madagascar, as we've seen, is an island of wonders today, endangered wonders, but hey, maybe we can help. And has been for more than 80 million years, and even before that holds some really cool secrets. And that's where we will end our Madagascar discussion for this episode.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed this tour through time, this Malagasy tour through time. It has been a lot of fun. Big thanks again to Thomas for this suggestion.
Yes.
That was a really fun
topic to get to explore. Yeah, Madagascar is one of those places, very much like the Galapagos, that are just so... they're just so unique that you can't help but be intrigued once you start taking a closer look at just all the weird stuff that's gone on there. Now, both also have the same factor of they are in great danger, so they need as much protection as possible, but
Yes.
there's a lot of stuff there that we don't want to lose, and it's just it's awesome and it's sad.
It is. But we've been happy to be able to do this tour through a fascinating part of the world. And I learned a ton. This was one of those, I love these episodes where I get to do research and go, what, there's no vipers on Madagascar? That's cool. I didn't know that.
It's usually when we do episodes, there's a bit of a, there's things that will come up where I'm like, oh, cool. That's neat. But usually we're pretty even. Every now and then we'll do episodes where the other one is like, oh, what?
Oh, this was a fun one where I was like, Will's going to be super excited to hear all this stuff. I'm excited to tell him about it.
There was lots of moments where I was like, no way. You're joshing me.
So big thanks again to Thomas. Thank you to all of our listeners. As always, there will be a blog post that has extra links, and we'll throw up some fun pictures of some of these creatures we've talked about with links to other places where you can find more information about them. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to hear more about this or other localities or any other topic, as always, we are always taking requests. That's all we do nowadays is talk about things that have been requested, which is awesome.
A long list, and it's amazing.
And our listeners are the best. Send us requests, send us feedback, send us comments and questions and such on all our various social media things. Listen to the outro for that. Hey, join us on Patreon if you'd like to. We're doing polls now where we'll let you help us decide what we do in the future.
To sculpt the future of the podcast.
Yes. Find us on the social medias. Follow us, like us, subscribe us, comment, leave reviews on iTunes. Do all the stuff that helps other people find us even better. We release new episodes every fortnight, so episode 41 will be coming up in 2 weeks.
So look out for it.
So keep an eye out. And I think that's it. I think that's the whole episode.
Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks
Hope you
again.
Enjoy Madagascar even more now.
Yes. And we will see you next time for more stuff.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.